I am a Korean with a British citizenship. I've been working in the aviation industry, but this war in Ukraine urged me to create the Hwarang Warriors. The Hwarang Warriors is comprised of Korean Ukrainians, overseas Koreans without South Korean citizenship, East Asian volunteers, Ukrainian locals, and international volunteers, and is made up of two parts. One part is made up of combat soldiers, and the other is a civilian support team. The civilian support team supports Hwarang Warriors with their talent. Those with skills in IT, drones, etc. can donate their skills. And those with skills in video and music production can donate their skills in those fields. In addition, those who can hold rallies in support of Ukraine or participate in activities to receive donations in South Korea and other countries they live in can donate their skills through such activities. Those who work in emergency medical care and severe trauma treatment can help by educating combat medics. Currently, the Hwarang Warriors is focusing on preparation stages, such as recruitment and training. However, it has been providing medical supplies and non-lethal military supplies to the frontline troops. We are recruiting to form a force of at least platoon size. We are also requesting that ethnic Korean Ukrainian soldiers serving in the Ukrainian military be assigned to the Hwarang Warriors and work together. But we are also planning activities to urge defection through propaganda broadcasts targeting North Korean troops and to deliver messages to prevent suicide among wounded North Korean soldiers. There are many reasons, but the biggest reason is that ethnic Koreans who struggled for Korean independence movement in the Far East Russia were forcibly deported to Central Asian Soviet republics by Stalin, and only in the late 1980s were granted freedom of movement and some were settled in Ukraine. Their new homeland, Ukraine, is in crisis due to the invasion by Russia, and as a fellow Korean, I thought it was natural to help their descendant ethnic Korean Ukrainians defend their current homeland as a token of our gratitude for their ancestors' contribution for Korean independence movement. The Republic of Korea determines eligibility for residence in the Republic of Korea based on how many generations of descendants they are. If they do not meet the conditions, you may become a separated family. We could not pretend that their ancestors' homeland, the Republic of Korea, is in a situation where it was beyond their legal capabilities. I had visited Ukraine before the war, so it is not a country I do not know. Second, if we look at history, the defeat of Ukraine would bring disaster to Europe. It could have been a global disaster later. Alexander the Great and Genghis Khan also absorbed and conscripted troops of countries they conquered and mobilized them for wars of conquest. Imagine if the Ukrainian army, dressed in Russian uniform, were mobilized for war and Ukrainian men were drafted by Russia. This would result in Russia recovering the troops it had lost in the war, and they, with their wealth of combat experiences, would be the greatest threat to the security of Europe. The UK, where I live, signed the Budapest Memorandum and promised to protect Ukraine's sovereignty and territorial integrity. The British government, along with the USA and Russia, signed the memorandum but had failed to keep its promise. So, for the future, it is decided that this is the right path for peace and security in Europe and the world by protecting Ukraine. It is difficult to briefly describe the actual combat situation. Ukraine is a very large country and the front lines are very long. So the situation is different on each front and changes frequently. Overall, it can be said that it is close to stalemate. Currently, the most lethal weapon is artillery. More than 70% of casualties are caused by artillery shells, followed by drones. But as drones become more lethal, their role is expected to increase. In addition to FPV drones, many drones are being used that use optical cables to avoid the radio interference, and AI drones are likely to appear soon. In the current situation, all support is needed. You can think of everything as lethal weapons, non-lethal military supplies, and other humanitarian aid supplies, generators, and large power banks that can store electricity generated by generators and use it at home are very helpful equipment for civilians who are suffering from Russian attacks on energy-related facilities such as Ukrainian power plants. Ukraine now has a lot of firearms that use 5.56 mm NATO bullets. So 5.56 mm bullets for AR series guns are used. NATO bullets instead of AK rifles would also be helpful. Along with 155 mm shells that South Korea has, rifle bullets would also be helpful, and weapons that South Korea has retired, such as night missiles, would also be helpful to Ukraine. Of course, if K9 self-propelled howitzers could be supplied, it would be the most helpful. President Zelensky's approval rating is still high. His term ended in May last year, but he continued to serve as the president because Ukrainian constitution stipulates that elections cannot be held during the martial law. Also, elections cannot be held in territories occupied by Russia. So even if an election were held, it would not be able to fully reflect the will of the people. Britain was also unable to hold elections during the World War II, and Winston Churchill remained Prime Minister until the end of the war. Despite the fact that Ukraine cannot hold elections due to constitutional provisions, Russia is using this as an excuse to call Zelensky a dictator, and Ukraine an undemocratic country. And pro-Russian figures in South Korea, including Jo Han-bum, are spreading fake news to the South Korean people while maintaining Russia's position. The most important equipment is artillery, especially self-propelled howitzers and 155 mm shells. We also need engineered tanks called Rhino in Korea. For our unit, the K1A1 rifle will be helpful for the first 1 or 2 soldiers in the front line of trench assault units, and the soldiers at the end to secure quick sight gaining and respond when turning the corners of the trench. Optics, gas masks, and South Korean military combat rations will also be helpful given the characteristics of the unit. Bulletproof and non-bulletproof ambulances and used vehicles such as trucks, vans, and SUVs will also be of great help. The number of North Korean soldiers is increasing, and also North Korean weapons are appearing on the battlefield. The North Korean soldiers do not know why they are fighting, and the wounded North Korean soldiers are blowing themselves up with grenades. This is because the North Korean military has been trained to consider being captured as the greatest shame. This is why there are already known number of North Korean casualties, but only 2 North Korean prisoners were captured. The reason is that the rest of the wounded are committing suicide. We are preparing a propaganda campaign to encourage North Korean soldiers to surrender and prevent the wounded from committing suicide. We also need help from North Korean defectors in South Korea who can donate their skill. We need help to produce broadcast and leaflet in the North Korean language style. The purpose is to reach them more close. There are people who spread fake news to create pro-Russian and anti-Ukrainian sentiment in South Korea. There are people who fake news such as Zelensky is a dictator, and Ukraine is a undemocratic country, and Ukraine provides North Korea with the ICBM engines is circulating. And that we should not help Ukraine because of this. People who are scholars who study in Russia and people with the title of professor are spreading fake news from the Russian government. People who have never been to Ukraine are pretending to know Ukraine and spreading pro-Russian messages. In particular, they appear on various YouTube channels and spread pro-Russian and anti-Ukrainian messages. Thank you. It is important to let our compatriots overseas know that we are behind them. There may be a situation where they volunteer to protect the Republic of Korea. Strong solidarity with them will also help the future of the Republic of Korea.